All right, everybody, welcome back to the Mindful Hunter podcast. I'm your host, as always, Jay Nickel. This is episode number 24. Super special week for me this week. We have a guest on the podcast, Mr. Adam Foss. He's probably going to get uncomfortable that I bring up a couple of his accomplishments. But back in 2012, he was the youngest guy ever to do the Grand Slam with a bow. That's all 4 species of wild sheep: bighorn, desert bighorn, stones, and Dall. And I could go on about the accomplishments, but I think the second one I want to mention is the Yeti book that recently dropped, because I think those two provide a really interesting juxtaposition to why I personally wanted to interview Adam so much, because you've got this like hardcore gritty hunter on one side, but then this like aesthetic and sensitivity of an artist on the other side. And it's like the combination of those two I found really interesting, and he's being able to accomplish just some phenomenal stuff. And he's a fellow Canadian, and it's rare that Canadians get their due. So to have somebody like him kind of really have the spotlight shone on him lately over the past couple of years, I'm just really grateful to have him on the podcast. And we're just going to have a bit of a bullshit, talk some photography, maybe get some gear tips, and yeah, just see where things go. So thank you very much, Adam. I appreciate you taking the time, brother.
Thanks for having me, and the outstanding introduction that I hopefully won't disappoint anybody after I've got big shoes to fill based on that. Thank you.
It's all right. I knew if I asked you to introduce yourself, you'd be like, I hunt every now and then and I take some pictures. And I was like, it doesn't really do it justice. So I'm just going to take this one. I think a great spot to start would be the beginning. Now, I didn't grow up. I kind of grew up in a hunting family. I'm from Ontario. We did like a yearly moose hunt, and didn't really do that after I was like 14, and then nothing again until my early 30s. So I'm kind of fascinated with dudes who grew up in it. So the fact that you kind of grew up in Alberta, right close to the bow zone. I mean, your old man and your brother are legends in their own right. Can you share a little bit about what that was like and how hunting became a part of your life, or did it just seem like it was always a part of your life?
Yeah, it was always part of my life. I mean, we grew up shooting bows as early as we could walk around, little long bows, those little Canadian Tire red limbed. I think they're called like Little Braves.
Right.
That's probably not politically correct anymore. That's what they were called. They're these red fiberglass bows with black grips on them. We'd be shooting gophers and terrorizing skunks and everything that had 4 legs. We grew up on a few acres just between Calgary and Cochrane, Alberta. And yeah, I mean, right in the bow zone for awesome whitetail hunting, mule deer hunting, moose, oak elk hunting, and then a little bit further west, you're into the Canmore bow zone for sheep. And I mean, legally can hunt once you're 12, and we were there doing it. I mean, it was every weekend, a lot of weekdays. I mean, I kind of had the mindset with my teachers in high school. We would get yanked out of school. I would go in there with what tags I drew and what trips I was going on, and get some homework. And like September was more often than not spent in the mountains hunting. And it just evolved from stuff around home, deer, things like that, to the mountains. And it's just like a really hook, line, and sinker way to kind of get involved in bow hunting is doing it with your family and doing it in a place like the Rockies and doing it for sheep. It's like you kind of don't even have a chance to not fall in love with it, and you sort of it gets in your guts pretty quickly, and that's what happened. I mean, I was kind of doing backpack sheep hunts at an early age. I think my birthday's at the end of September, so I was 13, turning 14, doing backpack stuff with my old man. At the same time, I was taking a black and white photography class in high school, so I was shooting, processing, editing, and printing film with a little Nikon film camera on those hunts, on those trips. I just wanted a piece to take back of all these awesome places that hunting takes you. And so that was how I got involved in both in parallel, and always did it as a passion. I was always a guy on, we used to do an annual sheep trip for the opener every year. And I was always a guy like packing camera gear. And this is like, I don't know, 2003, 2004, 2005 kind of thing. Bringing camera gear, taking photos of everything. and they were all really, really, really crappy photos. But that's how I kind of learned. And yeah, really fortunate, really lucky that it's evolved and blossomed into a little bit of a career and as a vehicle to take me to a lot of cool places, meet lots of interesting people. And hunting is just, in the way that we do it, in the style of backpack hunting and sheep hunting and mountain hunting, has just exploded. And there's these companies that are making fantastic gear, that are trying to tell important stories. And we're just really, really fortunate that they're around, and we get to do what we get to do for a living and call it work. It's just kind of like a pinch me every time I'm out there, every time I wake up, to be honest.
That's awesome. And you kind of answered one of my questions before I had a chance to ask it, because I was interested in when kind of photography became an integral piece, but it seems like it was a really natural evolution and seems really genuine too. Like, it wasn't like, there wouldn't have been no Instagram back then. This was not about showcasing or bragging. This was about just trying to record a piece of memory so that you'd have something after the fact to look back on.
Yeah, I mean, well, in Cochrane, Alberta, the internet probably didn't get there till like about 9 years ago, and Instagram and Facebook about 7 years. I'm just kidding. It was there at normal times. We had dial-up internet. Social media wasn't really a thing. I mean, I got a shoebox full of old black and white prints of like my dad standing on top of a mountain that I shouldn't mention the name of in Alberta, and I've got old prints of my brother and my buddies from high school out hunting and doing stuff that just would be in the memory bank, but we would be long forgotten if it wasn't for some of those photos. So yeah, I mean, it's just the thing that I did. Is just the way that I was interested in being in the mountains and being in the backcountry. Yeah, just special. I mean, it's really special. I mean, that's what kind of, it was a family thing. Hunted with my dad, hunted with my brother, hunted with a few really close friends. Now is the same. Hunt with a few close friends, family, my wife, my brother, my dad. It's like these people. It's such a special thing. I mean, it's like borderline religious. I mean, in the sense that it's an all year, all encompassing thing that I'm thinking about. And so to be able to take photos, to kind of have them, it's just cool. I mean, it's just really cool.
So one of the things I find interesting about mountain hunters in specific, and I tend to do a lot of stuff by myself, and people always think it's badass, and it's just because I don't know anybody dumb enough to come with me. But people are always asking me like, how do you go back in there by yourself for so long? And and I always say, like, you got to understand, this is not something I need to make myself do. Like, it's difficult, but like, this is what I think of when I think of a good time. Like, my wife says, where do you want to go on vacation? I'm like, I want to go in the backcountry for 12 days by myself. And she's like, I was kind of thinking Maui. And I'm like, and then we got to have that conversation. But, yeah. And I kind of know where that came from for me. But like, do you think you got that from your dad? Was it an example you saw growing up? Is this like a nature nurture conversation? Like, you are not a normal person due to like what you find enjoyable and the levels to which you're able to push yourself. Where do you think that came from?
Well, I would say it's in all of our DNA to some sense. I mean, we're supposed to be out there. I mean, just the feeling that you get when you're sitting on a mountain looking for animals, or listening for footsteps in the forest, or I mean, even when you're looking for mushrooms or fishing, even like any of these kind of natural ways of interacting with wildlife in wild places, like, we are so meant to be doing that. And there's this like feedback loop of, wow, this scratches an itch that does not exist anywhere that I've found. I love hiking. I love mountain biking. I love going on river trips and fishing and things like that. But hunting and kind of like this pursuit of an animal it just scratches a completely different itch. And so there's just sort of something that's tugging me back time and time again, and going a little bit farther, a little bit deeper, a little bit higher, a little bit longer, probably same as you might share that. And then the other thing is, yeah, I mean, it's just it's hard to put into words, to be honest. It's hard to put into words because it doesn't make sense to most people, but more and more it seems like people that are getting into hunting, they get it. I mean, I just talked to a woman from Seattle. She has a cooking show. She is like wanting to get into hunting, and she's started by foraging for wild edibles, and like she's tried hunting, and she's like, wow, this is like, why do you think I like this so much? I shouldn't really feel like I shouldn't like hunting. And then my response is kind of like, well, actually you should. Because like we got forward facing eyes. We are looking for patterns. We're trying to be in environments that challenge us. And that's the other thing I'd say too, is like, we're supposed to be challenged. I mean, we got soft hands and no hair on our bodies. We've gone years and years and years without doing too many hard things. And I mean, we're supposed to be doing that. So challenge in whatever way you define it. It's sort of one way to skin the cat is to go backpack hunting, but there's lots of things that people do. It's my drug of choice, I guess, in terms of the challenging part. It is challenging.
Yeah, that resonates really strong with me. I kind of went through this evolution starting in my mid-20s. Everything before then was basically a write-off. Kind of went through like this CrossFit thing and then this competitive jiu-jitsu athlete thing. And like I just kept searching and I felt like I kept getting closer. And it wasn't until I found backpack hunting that I was like, oh, this is that thing that I've been looking for. And the way I always describe it to people is I never feel more myself than when I'm out in the mountains. Like here, I'm always like, what am I supposed to do and how am I supposed to be? A little bit, like there's just a little bit of that going on. And it's like, it's never like that out there. It's like, oh, this is what I'm meant to do. Like I feel perfectly myself and okay with and present and in the moment. And that there's an intensity to it. I think the mountains demand your focus. It's not a choice. Like if you are not present and focused, and it's like the purity of that focus. And it is, I like your drug of choice analogy because it's like, I come back and I go through a bit of withdrawal because the outside life doesn't have that same intensity that the life in the mountains does.
Totally agree. And I think the more that you do it, the more you go out with a certain mindset and you come back changed. You just never come back the same type of person, even if it's super minor. I think there's like a great fly fishing quote that goes something like, no two men step in the same river twice because he is not the same man. And the river, I totally butchered it. The river has changed and so is he, basically kind of thing. And I think about that a lot. I mean, you're out there, there's a level of intensity. There's also a level of reflection, and sort of your brain has an interesting way of working through problems you didn't even know existed because you didn't even really have time to listen to them because you're going a million miles an hour and answering emails, looking at notifications and looking at screens. And so it's sort of like being out there for a level of challenge and intensity, but also a level of reflection and introspection that is, even if it's just to go and honestly think about nothing and kind of clear your mind, it's pretty good. It's a pretty good recipe for doing that too.
I warn people on the solo shit because it's like, dude, you were going to start thinking about that chick you broke up with like 12 years ago. And like the things you thought you had dealt with and you were okay with, like your demons, they're coming back because there's nothing to keep them at bay. Like you said, there's no flashy screens. And like, dude, I can't even stand in a grocery line checkout for 30 seconds without pulling my phone out of my pocket. Like any dead space needs to be filled. Like it's a sickness. But out there, there's none of that. And it's just like you're forced to confront all this stuff it's the weirdest stuff, man. Like it's hard to explain. Yeah, things you never thought you were going to contemplate again. And then they're just like right there in front of you, which I think is cathartic. Like I think that's half of what it is for me. Like you come out, like you say, a little bit different every time. Okay, so let's transition a little bit into the photography thing. I'd like to know, and I think you already touched on this a little bit, but like how you think about photography in general. And maybe if I could add some more kind of context, are there any principles, for example, that you've developed over time or that have served you well that you try and keep in mind when shooting, or just a particular perspective you have when you go out there to take photos?
It's a great question. I think it's an always evolving one. I think I sort of think of myself as an observer of what's happening and trying to kind of dig through the layers of I mean, it gets thrown around a lot, but finding the story and finding the parts
Right.
that are working against the story, who's the protagonist and the antagonist and the characters and the arc of the beginning and the middle and the end. Just from a high level, this is sort of how my mind works anyways. I'm kind of always thinking, what's the story that I'm going to write in my journal and read in 80 years? Well, I'm not going to be alive, but some long lost person is reading, and kind of what happened, the sights and the sounds, the all the different factors that came into play it are all parts of a story that I would tell to you over a beer or something like that, and trying to put them down in image form, because I think they should be, a group of images should be self-explanatory or open to interpretation in some ways too, where you've got this like collection of let's say it's a hunt, but it can be anything, and they should sort of speak to the weather and the emotion and the challenge and the beauty and the hardship and the sort of like churning river, and then like these sort of like bringing these like bits of wild places like to people that maybe don't even know they exist on one hand, on the other hand don't even know that you encounter these things hunting. And I think that's like a big part of sort of just like a background or underlying mission of ours, myself and my wife Frankie, who I work with, is to let people know that these places exist. You should go to them. Hunting is a great way to go to them, but it's not the only way. And see them for yourselves. And the more people that know about them, care about them, will stand up for them and protect them. And so there's that element, and there's also the element of like hunting's probably not what you think it is. And by you, I mean just the average person. And it's I don't know. I kind of rambled and got off topic there. There's a few things going on in my mind with respects to photography.
It makes a lot of sense. And what really struck home for me was, because you've been doing these carousels lately on Instagram, and if you were to take any of the photos independently, it's kind of just a photo. But and I didn't know how intentional this was. I mean, obviously I assumed it was somewhat intentional, but when you scroll through them all together, I was like, I found it really inspirational. I made a mental note, like I'm about to leave on a bear hunt here in a couple weeks. And it was inspiring for me because I was like, it conveys a sense of tone about the hunt that I almost think is really hard to do otherwise, because you kind of need to like lead a person into what an interpretation could be. But the fact, and I don't want to get all sappy, but it's like good lyrics or something. You kind of know what he means, but it could mean a few different things. And when I see these groups of photos, like one is just a macro of a blade of grass, and then I see a couple of water beads on a tent, and then I see like the fog lifting in the big vista, and it's like, I get it. I know that week in the mountains, like I can feel like the dampness in the air and the chill in the morning, and it's like this collection of photographs is able to like bring that to somebody who wasn't
Love it. You're one of 100 people that would. I mean, no, that is the point. That's the point. And it is intentional, and it is kind of trying to show our, whether you want to call it a sport or a discipline of hunting, to the outside world that this is what we do, and this is really what occurs. I mean, it is an engagement with nature. It is 99.9% of the time walking around looking for animals, kind of looking goofy with way too much gear, and 0.01% killing something. And I appreciate you saying that, man, because that means a lot. And I think that's too, I think as an observer through a camera, trying to communicate these ideas that are somewhat prescriptive, but also open to interpretation, because then that way they're, for lack of a better word, and I kind of hate the word, but they're kind of authentic. Like it's like, this is what happened. This is like in photography. It's like, this is street photography, or this is documentary photography. This is like a dude sitting there and he looks old and he has these features about his face that he's seen some shit and gone through some times. And it's like, you don't really know, but you can kind of think about it. And hunting and nature kind of can be the same way. Is like, this is it. It's grand. It's macro. It's deep. It's fun. And anyways, yeah, I think there's lots of parts of it that go into it. And that's really cool that I resonate with you, man. I appreciate the kind words.
Well, I think what I learned about myself is that my failing, well, not, failing would be a strong word, but the thing I hadn't realized up until now is that I was trying to catch milestone moments. And I think you lose a certain, I like your word, engagement with nature, because you lose a certain depth of the engagement when you only have these like stochastic broken moments, as opposed to like this whole collection of the experience. And like, so that's the mindset that I'm trying to take in from a visual perspective with this next hunt, is like more about, because that's what it's like when you catch the sun rays coming through some leaves and then you get some like rain on your face. Like, these are the moments that make a hunt. And these are the things that contribute to the sights and the sounds and the smells and the feels of what it's like to be. It's not just the grip and grin at the end, or the big impressive mountain shot with the sun shining on everything just perfect. It's like all that little stuff in between is where it really happens.
100%, man. Yeah. It's the in-between moments. And that's what it's all about. The story would be incomplete. I mean, it's like, I got a buddy who's an outfitter up in the Northwest Territories. It's like reading a book and only reading the last page of it or something, right? It's like the book is only good because you read the whole thing. So yeah, I think you're thinking about it. And you are the mindful hunter. So
I'm trying to be.
Driving it forward. You keep thinking about it. We've obviously spent too much time on a hunt thinking.
This is true too. You got to enjoy yourself sometimes too. Okay, so do you approach different hunts? Like, you're kind of known as a sheep guy, but that's not all you are. If you were, and let's say it was a brand experience, like it's a Sitka thing or something, depending on, let's say, the animal or the terrain, do you approach different hunts different ways as far as how you plan to tell the story?
I mean, there's probably both. For anything, there's a level of just planning that goes into these things, whether it's just, and I mean, I think it's like, from a technical perspective, there's like some thinking about the shots that you're trying to get, the gear that you're going to bring to get those shots, for sure. That's good. That's like basic. The other thing is just like scratching the itch of like the interest of a hunt that is occurring. Like, why is this person or people hunting these animals? How long have they been for? Where are they at in the timescale of their population, and what stresses are they on from a hunting perspective or a predator perspective or climate change perspective? Like, what's happening? What does it mean to this person to go on this trip? Are they experienced? Are they not? Is it the first time? Are they with their daughter? Are they with their best friend? Are they doing it by themselves? Like, sort of all these questions that you just make for a good, like I said, story over a beer. Like, the who, what, where, when, why, I think are important elements to preparing for a different hunt. And the answers to those questions will probably help determine how I would approach it. But I mean, I'm not overly freaking anal, man. I'm like pretty, it's like, stuff is all over the place for the most part. And I sort of like this, to scratch the itch. Like, what's the curiosity of what's occurring here, and then go from there. Because if you follow that, then it'll sort of come across in the photography that you're creating. If you're kind of assigned something that you don't think is that interesting, people are interesting, man. Animals are interesting. Like, if I go on a turkey hunt in northern, I don't even know, is there turkeys in northern Ontario? Somewhere I've never been, I've never hunted. Turkey hunt in
Ontario. It's above Michigan. There must be.
There's something interesting there. And it's the job of a photographer, a storyteller, writer to find that and find the heart of it. And that's my job. And I like to think I can get it right more often than not, but often I get it wrong. And that's where the feedback loop of sort of the photography that you shoot the images that you edit, the stuff you put out there, and then kind of repeating that again and again and again and again, that kind of drives like a look or a feel from a hunt or something like that. And that's something that we're so spoiled these days because of like the digital age of photography. Like,
right,
you can go in your backyard and shoot pictures of the dandelions and bring them in to Lightroom and edit them, and then like see what you did wrong, and then you can go back out there, and like that loop is so tight now. And that's sort of a big part of it too. Right? Creativity is like a muscle. Like, it's like you flex the muscle, you train the muscle, you nurture the muscle, you give it water, you give it protein, you give it rest. And yeah, with anything, it kind of helps to continue to train that muscle, because it does atrophy if you don't use it. And so, yeah, I think that's a big part of it too. It's just like continuing to push yourself to do it and to take photos of different things that aren't even related to what you're trying to take photos of. I think that's a big part of it too. So, yeah.
Okay, so that's a good segue into kind of a more technical part of the conversation. What's your current setup?
Current setup, I've been shooting Sony mirrorlesses for the last 4 years, since about mid 2017. And was shooting Nikon before that, basically when Sony came on with the A9, doubled the battery size and battery life, got rid of a lot of issues with overheating. And the biggest thing was wide angle lenses were easier, or just, they kind of proved the test case of this is a viable market with these mirrorless cameras. And so they didn't really have a lot of wide angle lenses.
Okay.
And 2017, they started saying, yeah, we can do it. We can make it, because the sensor just sits like so closely behind the lens. It's actually like physically really hard to make a wide angle lens. Anyway, it's probably too technical, but 2017, they came out with more and more wides, and also just like really good glass that they didn't have, because they were just kind of dipping their toe in. Mm-hmm. And if you take a look at that and the video capability of the Sonys, it was pretty clear at that time, like, these guys they're gonna take over. And so I sold all my Nikon stuff with taking a bath and a bath on a lot of nice pieces of glass, which I'm happy I did now, but at the time was a pill. And so yeah, I've been shooting Sony since. Kind of have probably shot like most of the bodies that are full frame Sonys. I have an A7 III, A7R3 right now, an A9. I kind of rotate bodies. I probably have 2 bodies that are not functioning or half functioning at all times. I'm sending one for repair, or I dropped it in the water or something like that. So I have like quite a few bodies rotating through. And I usually don't buy the best, most recent body that's released. I usually try not to do that. I did that with the A9, but I try not to, because the money's in the glass. Like the value is in the lens. The long-term return on investment is in the lens. And so I'd rather spend the money on the lenses. And then the bodies are flavor of the week a little bit. They're coming out with new good ones every freaking 18 months. And so if you
I'm laughing because I just bought the A1.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, I did exactly what but I couldn't agree more about the glass too. I used to spend all the money on the body, and then I would get shitty, Tamron glass or something. And I've totally changed that perspective. Like, glass will outlast the body 100%. I couldn't agree more.
How do you like the A1?
It's insane.
Yeah.
Here was my thing. I was an A7 III guy. I loved it. In fact, I like the A7 III more than the A7S III. For somebody who's going to do photography, a 12 megapixel sensor just doesn't cut it. Amazing low light capabilities with video, and that's great. But I liked my 24 megapixel sensor in the A3, and I think that's still, or the A7 III, and I think that still might be the best bang for your buck Sony on the market right now. Just sold mine used for $2,000 to a pretty nice girl the other night, which is I think they're like $22.99 brand new or something. Like, that's a lot of camera for a couple grand, considering the A1 is like $8,500 plus tax. But that 56 mega, my problem was I'm always trying to carry minimal glass. So I thought to myself, you're almost getting double your lens because of the resolution of the dual sensor. Like you can crop in that much closer on those landscapes and that was my rationale.
Yep.
And it was funny when you mentioned at the beginning, before we kind of hit record, about people, how do you do your passion for a living? I made a very tactical decision a long time ago. I'm good at what I do for a living, and I do quite well. And that allows me the freedom to invest in my passion guilt-free. So I don't have to confuse the two. I don't have to find a way to make I drew that line, which I think is just one way to go about it. I haven't had an opportunity to shoot. My last big hunt was a goat hunt that I shot on the A7 III. It was great. I haven't had an opportunity to shoot a big hunt on this one yet. So it will really, we'll see. If anybody was going to ask, I'd say it's overkill. You don't need 30 frames per second. Nobody in their right mind is going to shoot 8K. And maybe when they come out with the A7 IV, I will realize I should have just waited because I probably could have got all the features I wanted for $4,000 instead of $8,000. But I've also found, from a gear perspective, I've never regretted buying the best because that seems to retain its value the most. And I'll lose 30% a year, 2 years later on Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace, but you'll still get to recoup especially with the Sony mirrorless stuff. There's such a thriving market for those bodies. But overall, I'm super impressed, man. I love the thing, and I'm looking forward to getting it out in the field, and kind of putting it through its paces.
Well, I was looking at it too. I was right there with you, and I think the answer to the question, is it worth it, is the combination of the photo and video capabilities of that camera is just insane, and in the same form factor as just the rest of the mirrorless line. It's actually mind-boggling. So when there is this kind of big paradigm shifting body release, which probably only happens once every 5 years, then there is a good instance to take a look at it. And I did that with the A9 in 2017.
Yeah. Game
changing, in my opinion. The A1 could be game changing. I burn through bodies bad, man. So it's sort of hard to kind of throw down the cash for a body that I know is going to last a year and a half, maybe two. Yep. And that's the only reason I haven't yet, but I probably will. I probably will, unless you tell me not to, or someone tells me not to.
So far, I'm telling you to do it. Do you do the Mac warranties?
No, I don't know anything about that.
There's this company, I'll send you the link, they're Mac, M-A-C, and they're a third-party warranty provider. They're out of New Jersey, and I bought a 3-year warranty for my A1 for $750. And it's anything. Fall off the back of a truck, I can ship them a crushed body, they give me a new camera. It can be waterlogged, they fix it, or new camera. And you can do it as many times as you want. And I just did the math. I thought I nuked my A7 III on that goat hunt. And I was like, ugh. And I just started doing the math. And it was when your camera starts getting worth that much money to have, and they come pretty widely regarded in the industry. I guess they're pretty easy to deal with, and they're not going to say, no, this was out of scope or something like that. So yeah, I'll send you the link. It was definitely worth it, especially when you're we're doing things with gear that was not meant to be done to the gear. So it just does not last the way it does for normal people.
100%. I have insurance on all this stuff for catastrophic things. Somebody grabs a Pelican case of all my stuff, but I think it's $2,000 deductible. And last camera I cooked, I mailed it in, and it took me 3 months to get a response, and it was just a pain in the ass. And I was like, oh man. So yeah, something like that. That's just a no fault, because that's the other thing is these things are tools. They are either used to share stories or, as a passion, or to pay the bills. And I don't really want to be without a camera ever. So I have a couple of them, but the insurance claim route was such a pain in the ass that something like this, if you're hey, I'm overnighting you this camera, I need a new one, then it's definitely worth the $750.
Yeah. I'll send you the link. So sticking with this theme, what do you like for glass these days? And has there been any significant shifts in how you look at glass or what you like to take with you?
I mean, traditionally I was like primes all the way. I would run 18, 35, 55, 85 and be super happy. 2 bodies, one on either an 18 or 35, one either on a 55 and 85. Like that's it. I thought it was, I mean, in terms of just actual like sharpness, can't really beat a prime. Low light capabilities, got sort of like a better aperture opening than you will like a zoom lens. So like maybe back it up, like a zoom lens for the audience, maybe talk about this stuff in the podcast now, but like is a variable focal length lens that you can go from wider to more zoomed in. Like a 24-70 would be like a classic zoom lens, or a 7200 would be a classic zoom lens. And then primes are like fixed focal length with a fixed aperture that only gives you one look, whether that be wide or medium or tight. Is this video going to be recorded?
It is.
See this?
Yeah.
Okay. We'll see it. And primes, I like what they offer in terms of sharpness, low light, and I like that they're generally lighter and more compact. That's the key thing. Lighter, more compact. Anything that's light that doesn't sacrifice like the photography quality, I think is well worth it. But I don't know. I kind of get away from, have been kind of shifting back and forth. I think that's kind of how we go. The pendulum swings back and forth. The kicker on the prime, and one thing I would say about primes too, is like they simplify your photography process, because you just look and you just see focal lengths. You're just like bing, 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 grab whatever one. Whereas when you have like a zoom, you're kind of like, I've watched people, and I do this myself, you're kind of like, it's like fear of better options. It's like, okay, should I shoot this wide or medium or tight? When you just pick up like the prime, it's like, this is it. This is all I got. I can move my feet and that's it. And I actually like that simplicity. I actually kind of recommend that often for people getting into photography. Is like, it's a great way to start. But I've been using a zoom a little bit more, and I would say, all that aside, like 7200 is like my one zoom that I like would bring now. It's very heavy. It's very expensive for the average like consumer or prosumer. It does offer a different look and like some bigger, longer lens, like compression of the mountains, and I like it. But I'm honestly like okay with leaving that lens behind, because I bring it, and it does live in the backpack a lot, because it's just, I just like my shit to be like right here, sitting here on my backpack all the time. And like the 7200, you can put it there, but I found when you do that, like the weight of the lens pulls on the body, and actually like after mile after mile after mile, you get a lot of loosening of the back element. The lens, like it just starts to loosen up, and like I've had to do like open heart surgery on that thing in the field, where like you're screwing it back together, and it's like no good. So I don't know. That lens like can stay in my pack a lot. But the zoom thing, I've kind of like the 24-70, like the zoom is kind of nice, and the reason I like it for some situations is like weather and not switching lenses. Like when it's shitty outside, you got to switch lenses. Like you're screwed. You're locked in on the lens that you have. And so it is nice. You can do one man band, one lens, like shoot, different lengths and get a lot out of it. Everything is like for video, it's pretty nice too, because again, you're just getting more coverage, like shooting like a wider array of shots rather than just one focal length. But I don't know, man. I answered that question way too long. I like both. I like primes. If I had a gun to my head, I got my closet right here with all my camera stuff. I would grab like 2 or 3 primes, and I wouldn't even think about it, and I would just go. And I know there's an element of simplicity that's driven from primes, and also distilling down to like the craft of photography that it should almost be distilled down to, where like go make a great image with a 50 and a body, or an iPhone, right? Go take an iPhone and put it in portrait mode or whatever and shoot a photo. And like, it's a pretty damn good photo if you're in a cool place and you think about all these other things in photography that nobody talks about or thinks about, which is like lighting and composition and all these things. It's not just gear. It's not just a piece of equipment. So yeah, I kind of like that. Just like I said earlier, it's a little bit of a muscle that needs to be flexed. And I kind of like the creative challenge of like if I'm going to go like, so I'm in the Okanagan, my like family's here. My aunt and uncle have a big orchard and they have apples, and we just planted all their stuff in their garden. It's like, if I'm going to go just take photos of the kids and the family, like I just grab a 50 and a camera and like go. And I love it. It's like so fun, and photos of babies and just like normal stuff. Like I live a normal life, like most of the time. It's pretty damn boring. And for stuff like that, it's like nifty 50 body, take some cool photos. And I love that stuff. It's like, those are some of my favorite photos. So like, why does that same theory not apply when you're out in the mountains, you're in this beautiful place? Like, why do you need some different crazy gear or some crazy filters or some super expensive body? It's like, actually, you probably don't. You probably don't.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. Resonates with my own journey as well. Like I've gone through a bunch of stuff, but in this most latest iteration, I was doing everything on a 24 mil. The other thing is I'm always solo, so I need something I can shoot myself with. So it's got to be a little bit wide. And I like the 24 frame. And again, it forced you to be creative within those limitations. And then I was on this elk hunt in Northern Rockies, and I was like 85 meters from a caribou, almost came to full draw. And I have this footage and you can't even, it's like, there's nothing. It just looks like red brush. Like, and I'm like, I need more. And then, so that's when I went to the 24-70, because again, that kind of run and gun mentality, I don't have time to put on a second. Like it just hangs on my chest, and I need, and so the 70 gave that to me. And just now, this will be the first hunt I've taken 2 lenses on in half a decade. And I just bought the 35 millimeter f1.4, the new Sony one. And because I'm trying to focus more on my artistic photography, and the 24-70 only goes to f2.8, and you can't really get that soft, shallow depth of field the same way you can when you get like, down below an f2 or something like that. So, and I was looking at, it's like 400 grams or something like that. Like it's just over 3/4 of a pound. And I'm like, I'm a big guy. I could carry an extra 3/4 of a pound to add another like level of interest. But I think you summed up the whole prime zoom. I would also say technology has come a long way with zooms. When I used to buy the kind of lower end zooms, you just didn't compare to the primes. Even like the Sigma Art 24-70 I have right now is a really nice lens, and it's like $1,400. Like that's pretty reasonable for the quality that you're getting.
Those guys are making killer lenses, man. I don't understand how they do it for the prices they do. It makes me feel like the other guys have been ripping us off this whole time.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. Okay, we don't have a whole lot of time left, and I want to get into a little bit of gear stuff. I want to give a shout out. You did a phenomenal video called Gearing Up for the Mountains, and it's on Adam's YouTube. Just search Adam Foss in YouTube. So I'm not going to ask you the same questions, but one of the things I loved in that video is that you said gear concepts are just as, if not more important than an actual gear list. And you don't have to go through like a laundry list of what your concepts are, but maybe just share with everybody like the way you think about gear. Because I think that's missing these days. Everybody's like, what boots should I get? What tent should I run? And it's like, that's not, you're asking the wrong question. So if you could expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thanks for the kind words. We did that video for Wild Sheep Foundation Sheep Week. It was like an online seminar. I do that seminar live. Over the years, I've done something or a version of that for the Wild Sheep Foundation, which if anyone's listening, check out Wild Sheep Foundation. And they're a nonprofit that's helping put and keep sheep on the mountain. So a little plug there for you. Wild Sheep Society here in BC is a chapter of Wild Sheep Foundation too. So you become a member or look at what they're doing too. It's important stuff for what we're interested in, which is sheep and wild places. So that's where that video came from. You can check it out. The concepts, I mean, we could do a whole podcast on this, I think, very, very easily. But a couple of key things I think that I try to urge people to do is making it very, very personal to themselves and the situation that they are in on a particular hunt. I think it's just, it's very easy to just get a gear list. And what I've seen is you get a gear list, you use the gear in a different way than it was intended for, and you end up a little bit disappointed. So there's a big knowledge gap. And I think hopefully you can help people not go through the ups and downs and things that I've gone through and you've probably gone through of using the wrong tool for the job. But at the same time, that learning kind of builds in a little bit of memory of the pain that happened when you brought a tarp instead of a tent, or too light of rain gear, or somebody told you these boots are awesome and maybe you got them on a deal or something like that, and you have wicked blisters. It's like those little, I've done all those things, and now I know like what kind of lessons I don't want to relearn. So I would just say that from like a high level, and then maybe a bit more granular. It's like this really big pendulum swing of durability versus ultralight versus functionality that everybody kind of like immediately start looking at gear. And if you're not super experienced, you start seeing like ultralight hunting and ounces make pounds and pounds make pain, and these sort of mantras that I think are really good to think about. But also they come with a huge amount of pay. Like you're eventually going to pay the price on whether it be comfort, whether it be cutting a trip short, which those are two easy things. It's not a big deal, but you might pay it in a more dire sense. And so what I'm trying to spit out here is, I didn't know you were going to ask me this stuff, because I'm like trying to remember back to that video, because I just sort of like did it all on like a one take. Yeah, I mean, it's like there's a temptingness to go to the lightest weight gear that you can possibly go experience. They're looking at the weather. Maybe it's a shorter trip. They're crafty enough that they can figure out how to get out of a situation that they find themselves in. If their gear fails, they can repair their equipment. They just know the limitations of it. And so I would just urge people to kind of think about a couple extra pounds, like isn't going to make or break your hunt, but it will allow you to be in a situation like a snowstorm, or, you know, a sort of worse situation that you don't want to end up in, extending your hunt, extending your comfort, and being out there, than it will just like going ultralight, lightest weight gear, and kind of like your backpack breaks and your boots break down and your tent rips, and then you actually don't even get to experience what you're out there to experience. And then, yeah, there's lots of other stuff like gear as double duty, gear as like things that are can be used for many different things. Like you can use duct tape for a lot of things. You can use your trekking poles to pitch your tent. You can use your phone now as a camera and a book and mapping, and like using gear multiple ways, and almost like nothing in your gear list should really be in your pack if it doesn't serve multiple purposes. I mean, outside of like the very specific things like a weapon and your optics, but yeah, and then clothing systems too. Clothing systems like are really, really important, and people just bring too much clothes. They bring the wrong clothes. They bring like many pairs of socks and underwear that they don't need. They bring 2 pairs of pants, or they bring like things that overlap, like multiple insulation layers, and then no like windbreaking layer, or your windbreaking layer probably double dips as your rain gear anyways, and that's cool. But they'll bring like 4 t-shirts, and then like maybe they won't bring rain pants. They're like, I don't bring rain pants because like it probably won't rain, and you know, it's just an extra weight. It's like, but you have like 6 like things that you can only wear one of at a time, and you don't have this other super functional piece of gear, which actually, like to mention rain pants, it's like you don't wear rain pants just when it's raining. You wear it when like there's condensation the night before, or you're sitting down glassing on like cold rocks and the wind is blowing. Like throw those things on. They completely block, like if it's a vapor barrier, it blocks wind, it blocks moisture from the ground. It's like pretty useful piece of equipment. And like now you can get rain gear that's 10 or 11 or 12 ounces for the pants. It's like, that's going to be a way better use of your weight budget than this extra stuff that you have. But I was trying to condense it all. How did I do?
No, you hit the highlights that were important to me, because what I've learned is I take less now, but the things I take tend to be heavier. Like the sleeping pad I take now weighs almost 3/4 of a pound more than the first sleeping pad I ever bought, because I slept like shit. And I'm like, oh, that's not a 3/4 of a pound. I want to save. And you start to, people underestimate the importance of recovery and comfort. And it's like, if you think about it as its function to increase the likelihood of your success, it's the same thing with optics, man. Like, yeah, okay, I can get away with shitty optics, but if my eyeballs start bleeding out of my head, I'm going to stop glassing. And if I stop glassing, I'm not going to find an animal. So I think it's deeper. And I do think that there is a penalty to be paid. I talk about my backpack all the time. So I'm a Kafaru guy. I love my Kafaru pack. Yes, my pack and frame probably weighs 3 pounds more than a Stone Glacier or another ultralight pack. Stone Glacier is a bad example because they're actually good packs, but any ultralight pack. But when I put a 120-pound pack out in my 8-pound Kafaru Fulcrum, it feels like 80 pounds. And if I put 120 pounds in an ultralight bag, it's going to feel like 150 pounds. So I think there's give and take there, and certain things are worth cutting weight on and certain things aren't. And I think you nailed it. It's more about the selection process. Don't try and bring a whole bunch of really light shit. Bring a few really useful items. And if they end up being a little bit heavier, it's fine because you have less pieces overall.
Yep, 100%. And I think you forget often, it's tempting to forget often about what's the like worst case, best case scenario. I mean, best case scenario, you kill an animal 20 miles back and you have to get back to the airstrip and you have a full sheep or a goat or something like that and you're by yourself. That's fine when we're talking. Yeah, I mean, you just nailed it. It's like, that's maybe what's going to happen. We're hunting. We're out there with the goal of killing something. Often we don't, but that's the goal. And you have to kind of be prepared for that scenario. The scenario of like sitting in your tent for 7 days. Like, do you want to pay 6 more ounces for a tent that's like a little bit bigger and you sure as shit know is not going to get blown away when you're holding the corners down? It's like, you probably do. So yeah, there's tons of examples like that. And I think what it boils down to is some level of experience and thirst for knowledge of using these pieces of gear in a practical sense that will allow you to kind of make those choices. And everyone's different, man. It's like my brother, like he doesn't need anything. He's like a freaking Yeti or something. Like he does not get cold. Core body temperature keeps him warm. I'm like cold. I want to be warm.
Yeah.
It varies person to person. So that level of it being personal is important to know too. And what works for me might not work for you because I'm choosing it this way. And yeah, maybe you have warm blood.
Okay. I want to respect your time, but I got 2 more quick ones. Are we good?
I'm good on time. Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. Awesome. I'd like to hear about the Dewpoint experience because I was lucky enough. I hit you up for sizing recommendations and then Barklow was good enough to send me a set of the Dewpoint. So I'm super excited because I'm like, this shit is really nice, man. Like I was a forestry engineer in BC for 15 years. I lived in rain gear 5 days a week, 52 weeks a year. Like I've worn everything under the sun. Awesome. So I was super impressed at how, and again, I haven't put it through paces, so I'm not going to put my stamp on it yet, but like the texture and the quality and knowing what they've put into it, I'm super impressed. But because you were kind of like one of their early testers and were kind of the main guy to bring it to market, what was that whole process like?
Well, I mean, the reality has been working with Sitka for 10 years. So I've had a lot of different testing experience with stuff that from base layers, like skin to shell, everything, other products that never went anywhere. Some products that are my favorite products now, some products that worked for some very particular applications, but didn't work for maybe they didn't have the durability or they didn't, maybe they're like, no way people would ever actually buy this stuff because there's going to be about 100 people on earth to make it a valuable sort of business decision. So I've been really lucky to kind of get a box of stuff. Sometimes it's 2 different colors of a pant sewn together and for 2 different fabric testing. It's like really cool. And Barklow, if you, it sounds like you talked to him or interacted with him, he's like kind of a mad scientist. He's like really smart about thinking about a way that the activity of hunting can unravel. And that's sort of what I meant by touching on it is like, I'm hunting with him a little bit and the way that his mind thinks of like, what is the worst case scenario that could happen? What are the chances of that happening? And can you basically take all of your shit that you have and live through it basically? And so, Barklow, the lead product designer at Sitka, is like really good at that. And he comes from a training Navy SEALs and Kodiak Island background and like doing a lot of stuff that's like, hunting is easy compared to like the stuff that you're talking about. It is easy. It's a cakewalk. We're just trying to like find these little 4-legged animals and play cards in our tent and drink a bottle of whiskey if we actually catch up to one. And like what you guys are doing is real shit. So that's sort of like the platform for his mindset. Fast forward to last year and trying out the Dewpoint in a more recent model, but then trying out different laminates and things like that with Sitka for like many years. And the process was take this thing on as many hunts as you're plan on going on and beat it up. And that's basically what I did. I mean, I loved the original Dewpoint. Like, I just thought it was like, there's a long evolution with Sitka's rain gear where they've used different gore laminates over the years and kind of in the earlier phases used some older gore stuff, which was called Paclite, Paclite, in their original, I think it was called Stormfront Light. This is like 2011, maybe. That was like pretty good, pretty light, just like doesn't have the durability. And not in the sense where like you're going to move and it's going to tear, but just sort of like the long-term like war of attrition that hunting is, which is just like sitting on sharp rock, crawling around, bushwhacking, abrading from your pack, sweat, blood, contamination from all these body oils and things that hunting kind of produces as a messy sport. And the evolution from that kind of went into some more durable, like gore laminates that I've always thought are really awesome. The Dewpoint that came out maybe like, I don't know how old that is, 6 years ago or 7 years ago, was awesome. Big fan of it. Lacked a little bit of durability in some areas. And they basically, like the new Dewpoint, in my opinion, is like as close to something that is durable enough to do almost anything with. And I say almost because there is people that are hard on gear and should not be using the Dewpoint, and light enough that it should always be in your pack,
right,
or truck or side by side, whatever you're hunting out of. I think they did a really good job of like finding that balance, because it's a really fine line to walk. And I think I wouldn't be able to speak to the technical nature of it as well as I probably should, but a lot of that lies in using that C-knit, which is a type of Gore-Tex that all these like mountaineering brands are using, Patagonia and Arc'teryx, and like they've been using it for years. And I've got buddies who are ski guides up in Alaska that are like, when is Sitka going to get C-knit? Like, when are they going to get it? And the reality is, take some level of testing to figure out if that's right for hunting, because it's not always the same as something like skiing, ski mountaineering, ice climbing, things like that. And when they heard about the Dewpoint, they were like, holy shit, man, this is legit. Like, there is no other hunting brand doing this. And yeah, I mean, the reality is like blah, blah, blah. Like, I'm just listing out a bunch of shit that is the ingredients that go into making something. But like, for me, I've tried this stuff out. It works. I've seen people wear other rain gear and like from other brands and seen it not work, like with my own two eyes, and like been very comfortable versus person not being comfortable. And when it comes to rain gear, it's just like, man, it's one of those things where it's like, you don't want to test out or find out that what you're using is not right at the wrong time. And so I'm pretty like bullish on like, man, this rain gear is great. The sort of downside would be it's expensive. So if you can't afford it, totally get it. But it's a buy nice, buy twice kind of thing. And it's just like, it's pretty damn good, man. I'll be curious to what you think, but it's not going to be, I mean, if you've worn every rain gear under the sun, it's not going to be Helly Hansen like rubbers.
Yeah.
In terms of workwear, it's just not. It's 13 ounces. It's a 13-ounce jacket and a 10-ounce pant. Like, that is actually,
it's crazy,
insane.
It's insane
when you think
man.
about it.
I lived in the Stormfront for a week on my Stewart goat hunt this year. That shit blew my mind. I was just like, I don't even have any words right now. And yeah, it's like probably close to $1,400 Canadian by the time.
Right.
But it's like, I have never worn, and I'm not sponsored in any way, shape, or form. Nobody gives me any money. Nothing I have ever worn comes even remotely close to the durability and the waterproofness of that Stormfront system. Now, it's on the opposite end of the spectrum. I think if you could do anything you want in the world, you got your Stormfront and you got your Dewpoint. And I cannot come up with a hunt that could not be satisfied with one or the other. Like, I wouldn't go goat hunting with the Dewpoint, and I wouldn't stuff, 1.5 pounds or 2 pounds of Stormfront in my pack for a sheep hunt where it may or may not even rain.
Yeah.
And I like having those two opposite ends of the spectrum. But I think, and people who listen to this podcast know I'm really bullish on Sitka. And like, I wore all the other guys first. And And I just think technologically they're just superior. Like, I'm not trying to like blow smoke up anybody's ass, but like, you just wear the stuff and like the stuff is just better. I don't know what to say.
Yeah, I mean, and I think it's like really good to be taken all with a grain of salt. And that's what I said in that gear video that you referenced. And that's what I would say first, and why I actually don't love just like giving gear lists, because
right,
it's like, well, that guy's like working with that company or he's sponsored by them. And yeah, what's he gonna say? And man, I'd say anyone that would say that about my comments, like, you're totally right. I mean, take it with a grain of salt. Don't take my word for it. Try it out for yourself. I would say this has been my experience with this product. I actually do know a lot of the people that work at a lot of the other companies. I see the gear that they wear and the way they make it. And I think that like the way that Sitka thinks about things and the way that they invest in like R&D for specifically rain gear is kind of insane. And so there might be, I mean, we'll go with whatever brand you want to go with. Whatever fits you, whatever fits your budget, whatever fits your style, whatever company you like, that's totally cool. I would say like, if you're going to drop the dough on rain gear, I would look hard at those two pieces of rain gear. I'd look hard at the Dewpoint. And then, like you said, the Stormfront, if you need that level of protection. But reality is most people probably don't. And most hunts don't dictate that you would need that level of protection. But yeah, I think it's good. I think it's good to take it with a grain of salt. Don't take my word for it. And it's been my experience. And I've seen, like, I've been on hunts where I'm like, I got the duct tape wrapped around the trekking pole and I'm like cruising along and I'm looking back at my buddy and I'm like tearing off pieces of duct tape for him and he's patching his gear together and he's not wearing Sitka gear. And I'm like, oh yeah, like we're just not having a great time out there. So it's been my experience. It's my direct experience from lots of days in the field. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of why they asked me to kind of help do like a little video kind of showing like the year of trying the Dewpoint out and write a little story of the trip that I did last summer with my brother and on his stone sheep hunt. And I'm like, I will definitely put, my name on it or be associated with it because I do believe in the Dewpoint. And otherwise I'd be really hard pressed to say like, yeah, let's do it. That sounds good. It's like, I don't want someone walking me up at sheep show and punching me because they bought the Dewpoint and they didn't like it. And that shit will happen. And I'll get punched for another reason. Like that's no problem, but I don't want to get hit because of someone didn't like the Dewpoint. And I think that most people out there, if they buy it, they get it, however they end up with it. I think they'll be pumped on it with the knowledge of this is lightweight hunting, sheep hunting, mountain hunting gear. That's probably like way more durable than you give it credit for just by when you pick it up and then like see how light it is.
Yeah. Okay, man, we're going to wrap things up. I feel like there was a whole bunch of stuff that we didn't get a chance to touch on. And hopefully, some point in the future, maybe after the fall is over and we both got a handful of hunts under our belt, I'd love the opportunity to kind of get you back on at some point in the future and have another conversation.
It's my fault. I rambled.
That's okay. That's the whole purpose. All right, man. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. That was awesome.
Yep. Thanks for having me.
All right. Cheers, Adam.